You've been told that Stoicism is strength, that it is calm in chaos, that it is reason in rage, that the Stoic man stands still while the world burns around him, unmoved, dignified, unbreakable. You've been told that if you suffer, if you ache, if you collapse inward, it is because you haven't yet mastered your reason. That pain is something to be studied, that heartbreak is something to be endured, and that anger is a wild beast to be tamed, not expressed. And so you try, you journal, you breathe, you endure, you suppress, you succeed, but deep inside, something cracks. Because there is a side of Stoicism you were never shown, a darker side, not evil but hidden, not false but misused, a shadow that grows when Stoicism is misread as invulnerability and practiced as self-erasure. This is the side we must walk through now, not to discredit the philosophy, but to complete it, because anything left in shadow becomes dangerous. Even a temple must be lit from within. This is not a critique. This is a revelation. And it begins not with strength, but with the wounds you pretend not to have. The Mask of the Unbothered Man. There's a man who quotes Marcus Aurelius daily, who recites, "You have power over your mind, not outside events," who never raises his voice, never breaks character, never admits he's hurting. He is admired, respected, perhaps even feared for his stoic calm. But when the doors close and the audience is gone, he stares at the ceiling, exhausted from holding it all in, his face blank, his chest heavy, his mind a war of unsaid things. He has mistaken Stoicism for suppression, and so he becomes hollow. This is the first dark side. Stoicism used as armor, not as alignment. When Stoicism becomes a mask to hide behind, not a discipline to grow through, you don't become stronger. You become invisible. You become disconnected from your needs, from your grief, from your body. You convince yourself that needing comfort is weakness, that expressing sorrow is regression, that feeling anything intensely is a betrayal of your training. But a man without emotion is not free. He is fractured. Marcus himself wept. Seneca mourned. Epictetus, born a slave, crippled by abuse, never pretended emotion didn't exist. They never said, "Don't feel." They said, "Don't be ruled." There is a difference. And forgetting that difference turns Stoicism into a prison. Numbness is not mastery. Somewhere along the journey, many confuse detachment with numbness. They imagine that a true Stoic must never cry, never love too much, never tremble, never need. They say, "I don't get close to people anymore." It's Stoicism. They say, "I don't let things bother me." It's wisdom. But look closer, and you'll often find not peace but pain frozen in place. Numbness is not mastery. It is a trauma response dressed in marble. It is what happens when you silence yourself so completely, even your own soul stops speaking to you. You were not built to be a stone. You were built to feel everything and choose. That's Stoicism. Not erasing emotion, but refining it. Not rejecting attachment, but tempering it with clarity. Not silencing grief, but standing still enough to let it teach you. But the dark side whispers, "You must never feel too much, or you're not stoic enough." And in obeying that voice, many become ghosts of themselves, efficient, controlled, and utterly unreachable. When discipline becomes punishment. There's another man. He wakes at 4:30 every day, cold showers, fasts, trains, reads Epictetus. Doesn't touch sugar, doesn't skip journaling, doesn't flinch. He is the image of discipline. But talk to him long enough, and you'll hear it. Not peace, but pressure. Not mastery, but fear. He is terrified of slipping, of missing one ritual, of losing control. His Stoicism is a cage built out of calendars and self-punishment. Because here's the truth: Stoicism can be weaponized against the self. What begins as structure becomes obsession. What starts as virtue becomes self-abuse. The daily review becomes a courtroom. The cold plunge becomes penance. The quiet strength becomes isolation. And no one questions it, because from the outside, it looks like control. But it's not control. It's compulsion. The dark side of Stoicism feeds on this misunderstanding, that the harder you are on yourself, the stronger you become. But there is a limit, and when discipline is driven by fear instead of reason, it ceases to be a virtue. You are not here to conquer yourself into silence. You are here to lead yourself, firmly but gently, into clarity. The danger of misapplied acceptance. You cannot control what happens, only how you respond. A core Stoic truth, one that has saved many men from ruin. But here's where it twists. Some begin using this truth not as a shield, but as an excuse. They accept injustice where resistance was needed. They tolerate cruelty where boundaries were required. They surrender to toxic situations because it's outside their control. This is the passive distortion of Stoicism, the idea that acceptance means submission. It does not. Seneca advised kings. Marcus led armies. Epictetus taught rebellion from within slavery. They didn't just sit and breathe. They acted. They built. They resisted, without being consumed by resistance. To accept reality is not to accept abuse. To surrender your need for control is not to surrender your duty to protect what matters. But the dark side seduces you into inaction. It whispers, "Don't interfere, it's not Stoic." And soon you are allowing decay, mistreatment, violation, under the noble disguise of equanimity. Number Stoicism was forged in hardship, but never in cowardice. The shadow of superiority. When you walk far enough into the path of self-control, another shadow rises. It is subtle, smooth, polished. It says, you are better than them, you are calmer, wiser, stronger. They are reactive. You are Stoic. And without realizing, you begin to look down at those who still struggle outwardly, those who still cry in public, those who still rant, those who haven't yet mastered their flame. You forget how hard it was to get here. You forget that you too once shouted into the dark, that you too trembled, that you still do, inside. And in forgetting that, Stoicism becomes a pedestal, one that isolates, one that blinds, one that alienates the very people you were meant to help. Because true Stoicism was never a badge of pride. It was a mirror to remind you of your limits, your smallness, your place in the vast order of things. The minute you use it to feel superior, you are no longer practicing it. You are simply hiding behind it. There is a certain quiet that looks like peace from the outside. A man who no longer argues, who no longer raises his voice, who seems content to sit in stillness, watching storms pass across the faces of others. But lean in close, and you may hear something else entirely. Not clarity, but emptiness. Not stillness, but absence. Not wisdom, but a kind of quiet despair. Because here's what they don't tell you about the dark side of Stoicism. If misunderstood, it does not merely numb your pain. It numbs your connection to the very people who might have helped you heal. When Stoicism becomes emotional starvation, there's a man, married perhaps, or once married. He read the books, memorized the meditations, learned how to breathe through chaos and detach from outcomes. So, when the relationship started to crack, he didn't raise his voice. He didn't plead. He didn't chase or beg or fall apart. He simply stepped back. He told himself, "This, too, is outside my control." And so he endured, stoically, but so did his silence. And eventually, his partner left. Not because he yelled, but because he said nothing at all. She couldn't reach him, couldn't feel him, couldn't touch the part of him that used to be raw, vulnerable, honest. She didn't want a marble statue. She wanted a man. But the Stoic had confused emotional openness with indulgence. He had mistaken withdrawal for mastery. And so, like many, he didn't break his vows. He just faded. This is one of Stoicism's most haunting distortions, when the man believes that to feel deeply is to regress, that to love loudly is to attach, that to risk pain is to fail the test, and so he loves from a distance, and calls it control. But love from a distance is not love. It is fear, refined. You cannot lead if you refuse to be seen. Another man walks into a room full of people who need him. Family, friends, a son who wants to cry, a friend who's lost his job, a wife who hasn't been touched with intention in months. And he listens, nods, offers a quiet, "You'll get through it," and then returns to his silence. He is proud of this restraint. It is, to him, Stoicism. But slowly, the people around him drift. They feel unseen, unheard. Not because he said the wrong thing, but because he said nothing at all. You cannot lead if you refuse to be seen. And yet many men fall into this trap, mistaking the Stoic's reserve for disconnection, thinking that to express is to pollute, believing that to advise is enough, and that to feel alongside another is to compromise their independence. But there is a kind of Stoicism that allows you to witness suffering without absorbing it, while still stepping closer. Heart open, ego quiet, armor down. Anything less is not Stoicism. It is isolation wrapped in philosophical vocabulary. When virtue becomes a weapon, you have done the work. You are calm in crisis. You no longer react to insults. You let go of the past. You are focused, precise, and stable. And then someone wrongs you, not violently, but carelessly. They fail you, or disappoint you, or act with a weakness you've long trained out of yourself, and you feel it. Subtly, almost righteously, "I would never have done that." You are above them now, above that mistake, above that panic, that failure, that insecurity. And this is where virtue turns into quiet condemnation. You don't punish them, but you withdraw. You withhold affection. You correct without warmth. You advise, but without grace. You are stoic, and yet you have wounded. Because true virtue does not isolate. It lifts. It understands. It remembers the road it took to get here. The dark side of Stoicism turns virtue into distance. It makes you forget how hard it was to let go of your anger, to calm your fire, to breathe through loss. And once you forget that, you begin to expect others to walk that same path with the ease of a man who's already reached the summit. You become a judge, not a brother. You become hard, not strong. And in your quiet disappointment, you fracture those who once trusted you to lead them gently. Control is not connection. You do not drink. You do not lose your temper. You do not fall into lust or gossip or pride. You are composed, clean, clear, but no one calls you in the middle of the night. Why? Because you've become unrelatable. In your pursuit of control, you've become unknowable. And this, too, is the danger that lurks in the shadow of Stoicism. The belief that control is connection. That if you simply behave well enough, master your impulses enough, others will feel safe around you. But people do not bond with statues. They bond with souls, with stories, with flaws honestly shared and strength gently offered. You were never meant to be unreachable. You were meant to be whole. Stoicism does not demand your perfection. It invites your self-command, not to distance you from others, but to give you the tools to love them more wisely. The dark temptation to isolate. There is a moment in every Stoic's path when the silence becomes seductive, when the solitude feels holy, when the detachment feels like purity. And in that moment, many disappear. They ghost old friends. They abandon hobbies. They stop dancing, laughing, risking. They become sharper but smaller, calmer but colder. They say it's discipline. They say it's philosophy. But it is often pain. Pain covered in ritual. Because the truth is, some men do not want peace. They want escape. They want to go so far inward that no one can ever reach them again. They want to avoid the chaos of life by pretending they've transcended it. But Stoicism was not designed for monks on mountaintops. It was forged in politics, relationships, war, betrayal, and loss. It was not meant to make you invisible. It was meant to make you invincible within the noise, not apart from it. So, if your path is leading you away from everyone, it may not be Stoicism. It may be fear in disguise. You cannot kill the fire, only direct it. There's one more shadow, a quiet, dangerous one. It appears in the man who no longer feels much of anything. Not joy, not rage, not grief, not hunger. He is efficient, observant, even kind. But there's no spark left in him. Why? Because in trying to master his emotions, he killed his fire. And now he moves through the world like a ghost of potential. You were never meant to extinguish your flame. You were meant to aim it. The Stoics never said, become less. They said, become disciplined. There's a difference. Your rage, it can build cities. Your sorrow, it can write songs. Your longing, it can birth devotion. Your grief, it can widen your heart. But if you mistake Stoicism for self-extinction, you will never light the world with your presence. You will only survive it quietly. And that is not mastery. That is erasure. Now, some exciting news. Our channel now offers a members club. By joining it, you'll unlock exclusive benefits, deeper content dives, and personal insights. Join us on this journey, and let's build a meaningful life together. And I also humbly ask you to leave a comment, as it helps my channel immensely. If you do not know what to comment, just write better every day, so I know you reached this far. And don't forget to subscribe for more content like this. Also, I've linked some books on Stoicism that helped me become the man I am today, and will also help you achieve a Stoic mindset. There's a moment in the Stoic journey that few speak of. A moment when your life is orderly, your habits clean, your speech refined. You are composed in the face of anger. You are still in the presence of chaos. You do not stumble. You do not flinch. And yet, you are not alive. You are preserved, hardened, like a statue behind glass. Impressive, yes, but untouchable, cold. This is the third veil of Stoicism's darker side, when the path to inner freedom is twisted into a fortress against intimacy, vulnerability, and the full bloom of life. It is not a flaw in the philosophy. It is a misinterpretation of its depth. Because Stoicism does not call for invulnerability. It calls for invincibility through alignment. It is not withdrawal. It is wise engagement. But when misunderstood, Stoicism becomes less about sovereignty and more about control. The shadow of control in the name of peace. Let's say you've been betrayed before, perhaps many times. You've loved and been left, trusted and been used, spoken truth and been punished. So you take refuge in Stoicism. At first, it's medicine. It helps. You reclaim your calm. You start journaling. You release the need to fix others. You begin to say, "Let it be." But deep beneath the surface, a quiet mutation begins. You don't just let things go. You start fearing them, avoiding them. You retreat into order, routine, control. Your life becomes so regulated, so polished, that there's no space for the unpredictable, no room for real closeness, because closeness means chaos, means risk, means the raw humanity Stoicism taught you to observe, not erase. So you reduce life to a series of manageable variables. Your peace becomes conditional, protected not by philosophy, but by distance. You've built a fortress, and now you call it freedom. But true freedom isn't the absence of danger. It's the presence of courage within it. Stoicism does not tell you to cut the world off. It tells you to walk through it with an intact soul. The fortress feels safe, but it's also a prison, a quiet one, a gold-trimmed cell where no one can truly reach you. When philosophy is used to punish the world, you've been hurt. We all have. You carry the memory of that insult, that betrayal, that abandonment like a scar etched on the inside of your chest. But now you're stoic. You don't react anymore. You don't yell. You don't explain. You observe. You retreat. You write your truths in a journal no one will read. And in this silence, something dark and subtle creeps in. A sense of superiority. You no longer want to teach them or heal them or reach them. You want to show them how well you're doing without them, how unbothered you've become, how evolved. This is the ego's last disguise, the moralist Stoic, the one who hides his judgment behind restraint, who says, "I've moved on," while quietly savoring the thought that his former foes are beneath him now. The true Stoic does not weaponize distance. He does not use silence as a punishment. He does not practice detachment for pride. He does not deny his hurt. He transforms it. But the dark side prefers you hold on to it in secret. Nurture it, harden it, and call it clarity. That's not Stoicism. That's revenge, reheated and served cold. Emotional isolation is not wisdom. Wisdom is understanding the tides of the heart without drowning in them. It is not pretending the ocean doesn't exist. And yet, in the name of composure, many cut themselves off entirely from their emotional reality. They tell themselves, "I don't get attached. I don't fall in love. I don't care what people think." And on the surface, it seems noble, empowered. But underneath, often, is a heart that has been abandoned by its own owner. Because here's the secret: to feel something deeply and remain true to your values, that is wisdom. To avoid feeling so, you never have to test your values. That is fear. Many Stoics, especially those new to the path, fear this testing ground. They think, if I love too much, I might lose myself. If I let this grief in, it might destroy me. If I show them my need, they might use it against me. And so they choose emotional abstinence. They cut out the mess. They deny the storm. But they also cut out wonder. They deny delight. They avoid the pulse of life itself. The dark side of Stoicism leads you to mistake absence of feeling for freedom from suffering. But the absence of feeling is not peace. It is spiritual anesthesia. It is what a man chooses when he fears that if he ever truly feels, he'll fall apart. The philosophy that becomes a mirror for pain. You've seen him. Or maybe you've been him. The man who knows every quote, who speaks of logos, who critiques the passions of others, who guards his time like gold, who carries himself with discipline, detachment, and a subtle disdain for the emotionally undisciplined. But watch him closely. His calm isn't centered, it's brittle. His detachment isn't peace, it's practiced avoidance. His discipline isn't love, it's shame in disguise. Because sometimes Stoicism becomes a mirror for unhealed pain, a structure where the wounded hide, not to heal, but to protect what they refuse to confront. You do not become strong by hiding from the very things that demand your growth. You become strong when you can sit beside your grief, your jealousy, your anger, and neither feed it nor deny it. When you can feel the full flame and not let it burn your house down. The Stoics never said, "Do not feel." They said, "Do not become your feelings." That difference is everything. The dark side wants you to forget that, to live in a shell, admire your control, and never risk the wildness that makes you human. But wisdom is not stillness alone. It is motion directed by virtue. When you start policing other people's emotions. Perhaps the most subtle corruption of Stoicism is this: you begin expecting others to behave as you do, even though they never asked to live by your discipline. You grow impatient with people's tears, with their outbursts, with their confusion. You want everyone to be composed, efficient, rational, clean. You start saying things like, "They should have seen it coming. They're just being emotional. They're wasting energy on something they can't control." And while some of this may hold truth, its spirit is hollow. You did not become Stoic to harden against others. You became Stoic to remain soft without breaking. If your peace leads you to judge others, you are not peaceful. You are proud. And if your clarity makes you colder to those in the dark, then your light is nothing but performance. Real Stoicism looks like patience in the face of others' chaos. It looks like boundaries, yes, but also compassion. It's not easy. That's why it's rare. Reclaiming what you've locked away. So what now? What happens when you realize that the path you took to become stronger has also made you lonelier? What do you do when you look around and find that you've mastered restraint, but lost spontaneity? That you've found order, but forgotten joy? You go back, not to the pain, not to the chaos, but to the parts of you that you locked away to survive. You open the vault. You breathe. You allow yourself to feel. Not recklessly, but responsibly. Not indulgently, but honestly. You reclaim the parts of yourself that didn't fit into the image of the Stoic you built. The parts that laugh loud, that cry over poems, that ache when you miss someone, that still remember how it felt to be held and hurt and loved. You bring those back, not to control them, but to lead them. Because they were never your enemies. They were your exiled kings. And now they're coming home. There comes a day, if you're honest, when the silence begins to ache. Not just the silence in the room, but the silence inside your chest. It's the kind that follows years of biting your tongue, of telling yourself, it doesn't matter. The kind that doesn't scream, doesn't cry. It just weighs, slowly, quietly, a gravity that pulls you inward until even your victories feel distant. This is the cost of Stoicism when it's misunderstood. Peace at the expense of presence. Strength at the expense of softness. Philosophy at the expense of being human. But the true Stoic path doesn't end in silence. It ends in restoration, in learning to stand still without freezing, to be calm without vanishing, to be resilient without retreating from the beauty and burn of life itself. Freedom begins where pretending ends. Many Stoic men walk with a heavy burden not because of what they feel, but because of what they pretend not to feel. The grief never processed, the heartbreak never spoken, the anger never released, the love never confessed, the longing buried under layers of structure and pride. and they call this self-mastery. But there is no freedom in pretending. There is no strength in suppression dressed as discipline, and there is no virtue in detachment when it erodes the richness of your humanity. The Stoic must return, not to chaos, but to truth, not to being ruled by emotion, but to being restored by honesty. It begins with admitting, yes, I have needs. Yes, I long for connection. Yes, I have been wounded. And yes, I have bled trying to act like I didn't care. That is not weakness. That is the first breath after years of holding it in. The Stoic heart is not hollow. Look at Marcus Aurelius, not just the emperor, not just the philosopher, but the man who lost nearly all his children to illness, the man who ruled during plague, betrayal, and unending war, the man who wrote to himself not as a king, but as a student trying to stay sane, trying to stay soft, trying not to break. He loved, he wept, he wrote. He didn't run from grief, he studied it, sat with it, asked it what it wanted to teach him. That is the Stoic heart, not hollow, not aloof, but alive, carrying pain like a sacred message, not a curse. So if you have buried your heart beneath principle, if you have starved it in the name of rationality, go find it again. It's still there. It has not forgotten you. Restoring feeling without losing form. There is a fear that if you open the door to feeling, the flood will come. That if you cry, you'll never stop. That if you let love in, it will destroy your clarity. That if you admit you're not okay, you'll lose the dignity you fought so hard to build. But the goal of Stoicism was never invulnerability. It was equanimity. You were meant to feel and remain whole, to grieve and not unravel, to love and still let go, to ache and still act with reason. That balance takes practice, not hiding. It means returning to your inner world and saying, I hear you now. I won't obey every emotion, but I won't exile you either. That's how feeling becomes integrated. Not an enemy, not a king, but an honored guest. Let it visit. Let it speak. Then let it go. That is Stoicism. Let the walls down, selectively, but surely not everyone deserves access to your soul. But someone must have it, or eventually you will lose your own reflection. The Stoic man must learn what he was never taught, that intimacy is not a loss of control. It is an extension of it. When you allow yourself to be known, not by everyone, but by someone, you do not become weaker. You become more accurate. You are no longer performing strength. You are living it, with your shadows in view. This does not mean oversharing. It does not mean bleeding for strangers. It means choosing a few, those who have proven safe, and saying, this is what I've carried. This is what I've hidden. This is what I still don't know how to name. And in that moment, a great illusion collapses. The belief that vulnerability and stoicism are opposites. They are not. They are partners. Because vulnerability, when chosen wisely, is not recklessness. It is proof of inner safety. It is the strongest man saying, I can feel this, and I will not be destroyed. From stone to soil. The Stoic man, at his worst, becomes a monument, unmoving, admired, untouched. But monuments do not grow. They do not adapt. They do not feel the sun. They simply erode, silently, over time. The man must become something else, not stone, but soil, still grounded, still solid, but alive, able to hold weight, but also to nourish, to change, to respond. You can be firm without being frozen. You can be still without being cold. You can be composed without being distant. This is what the world needs, not statues, but strong soil. Because everything that truly lasts, relationships, legacies, communities, grows in earth, not in marble. Let the flame return, but controlled, and now the fire, the one you buried, the one you tamed, the one you feared would consume your whole life if ever lit again. Let it return, but let it return not as a blaze, but as a torch. It can guide you now. You've done the work. You've learned how not to be ruled by it. But now you must learn how to use it. Let it warm your words. Let it sharpen your presence. Let it reawaken the beauty you silenced in the name of strength. You were not meant to extinguish yourself in pursuit of philosophy. You were meant to refine yourself, so you could re-enter the world as a fire that illuminates, not one that destroys. This is the Stoic reborn, not cold but radiant, not above the world but firmly in it, lit from within. Now, if any part of this message has been helpful to you, leave us your like and comment, helping the algorithm recommend it to someone who needs it at this time. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss new videos. And if you look through the videos we've already uploaded, you're sure to find something to take with you. Have a good day.